Johnny Test.
Got a head of fiery hair and a turbocharged backpack.
Welcome! My name is Gear Genius, and today we'll explore the shifting tides of Nexerelin together. This mod changes the base game's economy, how factions behave, and also introduces a few new mechanics that we'll talk about later. On top of that, I've also added extra factions and a few other things, like a metric ton of mods and whatnot. But I have to admit, the videos become quite long. In fact, this is gonna be the first out of 2 parts. And today we will cover some Nexerelin basics and everything you need to master the early game. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, it's been a while. But don't worry, the second part is already on its way. Well, I do tend to say that a lot, don't I? Anyway, if you're curious about my setup, the full mod list is located in the description right down below. But without further ado, let's hop right in. The first new inconvenience we'll see right after creating our character is a brand new Nexerelin starting menu, which allows us to fine-tune the game even further. Now, this can get quite confusing, so let me briefly explain all the sliders and whatnot. Our first option lets us randomize the core worlds, and if you turn this on, you can play around with extra settings like number of populated planets and so on. Besides that, we can also add extra starting colonies for every faction, but sadly not for us, I think. Not so sure about that. Anyway, beneath it we can adjust our starting relations with different factions, including whether or not they can respawn after they've been wiped. Now, we won't randomize the game yet, but if you're playing with a randomized sector, you can also disable certain factions right from the start. And nicely hidden under the tab Other Options, we can find what I would call difficulty settings. Things like enabling special traders, toggling easy or extra hard mode, starting with funds or in depth, setting your own starting location or that of your first colony, beginning with demodded trash ships, and choosing whether you start with neighbors in the same system.
I'll just have everything on the menu.
Nexerelin also allows us to complete any mission in the game, and I'm sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen, but for this guide I will skip the main story, because we already got too much other stuff to do, it's insane. And after maneuvering through all of this, if the mod is installed, we could also enable the Derelict Empire scenario here, but that's also not what we'll focus on today. Very not, brave viewer, it's nearly done, and if you wanna change anything from earlier, you can go back at any time. Now, in this segment of the menu, we can choose whether we want to be commissioned by someone, which I'd recommend for your first run, or start on our own, just like in vanilla. If you decide to go solo, you can even create your own faction, and in that case, besides the default option, you can also choose between the normal tutorial or the extra hard spacer mode, where you start practically naked. And while we are on it, I should also mention that each faction has its own natural enemies and preferred ship doctrines like low or high-tech designs. So, depending on your choice, you'll start with ships reflecting your chosen faction, and if you don't set the default relations to neutral, you'll also be at war with certain people for that. When it comes to firepower, right now I would say the strongest default starting fleet belongs to the Sindrian Diktat. I mean, you can't go wrong with one massive executor class capital ship and 2 brawlers, but that's just me. Play however you like. Also, starting alongside the Sindrian Diktat with default relations usually means you'll be at war with far fewer factions than almost anyone else. Of course, you could also go with your own custom fleet and start with something different, or just a bunch of massive capital ships, but if you go too crazy with your selection, the game will let you know. What does it say? You cheated not only the game, but yourself. Now, after selecting our faction and ships, we can adjust our risk, including our level and starting funds. On the highest setting, we even get a bunch of officers, although as far as I know, what skills they have is a matter of luck. For today's guide, I will take the low-level start, and just like in a proper roleplay game, Nexerelin lets us pick our character's background. Personally, I'd love to start with something like fire magic or destruction spells, but unfortunately, our only option here is in depth or specialized in AI ships, so I will just stick to the sort default unknown option for now. And as usual, we can now quickly spend a few points in our character skill tree, and I'll put mine into navigation, cargo and reduced fuel consumption later on to move just a little bit faster through the sector. And with everything in place, I think we are finally ready. So, with that in mind, focus, or the knowledge I bequeath upon you will be forever lost to the internet. a fresh new seed with an entire galaxy that has absolutely no clue what we're about to pull off. In fact, I have still some topics to explain that didn't make it into the vanilla guide, but let me not get ahead of myself. Besides our precious eagles, we don't have much to work with, and this time I've also set an additional challenge for myself. On our way through this mod, I will get good at maneuvering phase ships, cause, yeah, well, you can't actually trust the AI when it comes to piloting anything bigger than an afflictor, but you'll likely see what I mean when we get there. We also start with one captain under our command. May I present to you my boy Gerald.
You don't go too fast, I believe it, I'll sink in the oil.
He's quite indistinguishable, and I absolutely love him. Anyway, let's quickly make our way over to the nearest colony, so I can show off the mod and explain the game. Well, to get a better understanding of the changes that Nexerelin introduces, let us first take a quick look at the shop. In general, trading still revolves around the same items and markets, with taxed civilian and military markets as well as the untaxed black market. With Nexerelin, however, supply and demand behave absolutely chaotic, so we have to squeeze out any last bit of profit wherever we can. Personally, I don't trust the system enough to let it mess around with my tax credits, and with my friends on the black market I at least know what I'm getting. Relatively small quantities at cheap prices, and an almost guaranteed chance to get fucking stop searched by the nearest patrol as soon as we leave. If you get caught after shopping on the black market, this will cost you worsened relations and some minor ship repairs, assuming you're only carrying legal goods or have enough storage to hide your illegal cargo. And if you can't hide your illegal goods, everything the inspecting faction considers illegal will be confiscated. But even if you escape every single patrol on departure, smuggling too often will still get you marked as suspicious. The faction you've been dealing with will eventually put 2 and 2 together, and from that point on, the moment your fleet appears on their sensors, they'll be lining up for an inspection. Luckily for us, this suspicion decreases as our relations improve. You see, the only reason I bring this up is, in the early stages of a new game, we need to avoid taxes but also negative reputation wherever we can. And sadly, with Nexerelin things get even trickier, because enemies of your friends will eventually start disliking you specifically as well, which makes reputation even more important for us. So, if we want to trade unnoticed without crippling our reputation, we need to become Bane and master the art of shadow trading. Now, bear with me, I'm nearly finished yapping about this, I promise. In case a planet has no patrols nearby, it's usually enough to briefly switch your transponders off before you land. But if you want to use a black market on guarded planets, it's sometimes better to sneak in quietly. The safest way for us to do that is to head into the nearest asteroid belt and activate the ability Go Dark. This reduces the range at which other fleets can detect us and automatically turns off our transponder, so make sure no patrols in range to see that. In that state, we can dock at just the right moment, using the planet itself as cover. But sadly, after selling or picking up our goods, we'll have to do the same dance on the way back if you don't get spotted. Also, I only recommend turning your transponder back on when there's no fleets nearby, otherwise you'll get scanned the moment you light up. Whether you are smuggling goods or not, since the sector is very active in the base game, supply and demand constantly shift. With our Nexerelin setup though, let's just say the balance is a bit different.
These are not normal circumstances. The market is not functioning properly.
The special thing about Nexerelin is that over time, almost all markets slowly drift towards the same buy and sell price. And trading basically dies out, unless of course you start using the new features. So the Nexerelin mod kind of forces you to dabble in quests, bounties and explore the galaxy a bit more than you would usually. But if you don't want to miss out on the normal trading rush, I can recommend Ruthless Sector. This little mod makes the galaxy and its factions a lot wilder. We are talking bigger fleets, more trade activity and more diplomacy. But at least it also creates a couple of market spikes whenever someone gets raided, which happens pretty often. Anyway, since we can only trade a little bit at the beginning, we are kind of forced to use the new agents. But first, we'll need a bit more of, yeah well, I guess everything. And for now, we are still under commission by the Sindrian Diktat, but since wars are declared pretty frequently between factions in Nexerelin, if we want to trade freely, we better quit that shit ASAP. That said, having a commission can be extremely helpful money-wise if you plan to fight a lot early on or don't care about the wars. And while commissioned, we can't improve our relations above -50 until peace is declared, so it's often better to just wait until, yeah well, it's over. But with our cute little fleet, fighting is not my top priority right now. We also barely consume any supplies and can reach almost anywhere with just a bit of fuel, something the map conveniently shows if you're ever unsure. And with our nimble fleet, we were able to knock out a few survey missions right away, giving us some easy starting cash without too much effort. Also, while we are traveling through the sector, it's always a good idea to scan gas giants and magnetic fields whenever you come across them. As we keep doing this, we steadily gain experience in hyperspace topography, which unlocks powerful abilities along the way. No, I didn't cover this last time, but we're kind of busy today, so let's keep it short. This progression system works a little bit different from your regular character skill tree. Instead of spending points manually, you level it up by exploring, scanning planets, anomalies, magnetic fields, and generally by interacting with things and traveling through the sector. And as we accumulate experience, new abilities and passive bonuses unlock automatically, no skill point micromanagement required. All of these skills make exploration faster, safer and much more efficient over time, which makes it worth to scan whatever, whenever you can. Now, I want to clear up something real quick that I've seen in the comments. Some folks are saying that only with a commission you can colonize worlds in the same system as your employer without triggering the colony crisis event. Well, that's not actually true. In fact, you still suffer all regular colony crisis penalties and I can prove it. Look at it. We are in the same system as our employer and there's a colony crisis event. You see, only the full membership makes you official partners and protects your assets from factions at war with your ally, though it won't shield you from everyone else by default. But if we transfer a planet to someone else, now that's a completely different story. Whether we have a commission or not, the planet commander in the info hub lets us transfer the colony to another faction at any time. Once the planet is handed over, we still receive a share of its income, in our case roughly 1/3. This mechanic is kind of useful if you're on the verge of losing the colony, though given that we have paid and developed everything ourselves, it's quite a costly investment. At the same time, most of these crises tied to that colony disappear since it's no longer our direct responsibility. Now, whether you choose to cooperate and with whom is completely up to you. As you might know, each faction has its own backstory, and beyond outlining what they trade or ban, the faction intel screen also provides plenty of law-based reasons to dislike someone. As for the person league who we joined the last time in my vanilla guide, let's just say they are kind of rude with their blockades and, well, very of their time. Now, when I say very of their time, I actually mean incredibly fucking racist, so we are not siding with them today. This time I plan to romance Tritech, which is a bit harder because those people are also mentally sick.
That sounds like a challenge.
Unlike most other factions, the Tritech market treats all goods as legal, whether they technically are or not. Except AI cores, I guess. Sadly, to form a partnership with them, we first have to deal with their special colony crisis, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, while I was busy explaining things and you weren't looking, I added an enforcer and a pirate mute to our fleet, which gives us a bit more cargo space and opens up some decent trading opportunities, at least while it is still profitable. When it comes to trading in Nexerelin, you need to buy a bit more, let's say, optimistical than usual. As top-selling prices are changing by the minute, nothing beats a cheap buying price. And with the discounted goods in our cargo hold, we can now quickly check the best place to sell them by hovering over the commodity and pressing F1. Of course, you can also check any price while the item is still in the shop, but for convenience and quick price checks along the way, I like to carry at least one of every legal good with me. Anyway, that's all we needed here, so let's move on. As for our destination, planets under siege or in distress generally offer the best prices to sell. Once we arrive, it's simply a matter of offloading whatever turns a profit and picking up the next cheap commodity. And with a bit of luck, I managed to chain several trades back to back. Honestly, we ended up making more credit than I'd expected. Along the way, I also made a habit of checking the bar for delivery contracts or the occasional discounted ship, but couldn't find anything decent besides this sort of trash. Now, when I say discounted, these bar events are often mini-heists that require usually around about 50 marines and a couple of credits to steal the ship outright. And while most bars didn't offer much, one of them turned out to be worth it, as we run into a surprisingly trusting scientist who casually handed us the location of an alpha core, seemingly expecting we'd retrieve it for free. Now, trust me, we can actually make better use of it ourselves, but we'll pick it up later. I'm definitely not carrying that thing around just to lose it to an inspection. At the moment, aside from earning credits, the only thing we really need to keep an eye out for are some spicy weapons and basic hull mods. Since we are running a setup with more weapons and hull mods than usual, it sometimes takes a while for the market to spawn what we are actually looking for. So even if you're not heavily trading, it's still worth picking some hull mods up whenever you see them. Unfortunately, most of our trading time is actually spent traveling. But even if our trading routes aren't particularly long, we can still save a lot of time and supplies by scanning these little jump gates scattered across the sector. As you probably know, these odd-looking domain aura structures allow us to instantly jump between active gates for a fraction of the cost, and in the base game you can't actually use them until you've completed the main story, but we disabled that restriction in the Nexerelin settings right at the start, which means we begin our run with the Gemus device already in hand. From there, it's very simple. We just have to visit each gate once to activate it, and after that it becomes part of our fast travel network. Now, you probably won't even notice since I cut most of the travel out, but trust me, this saves an incredible amount of time. And I imagine it's a lot more comfortable for the crew than having to fly the entire distance manually. Of course, this kind of travel luxury doesn't come cheap. In vanilla Starsector it basically means spending half your career running academy errands across the entire sector. I'm already afraid of the day someone wants me to do a main story guide. However, with all our mods installed, this devotion to the academy and science feels like an unnecessary tradition from a bygone era.
It was an apparently irresistible spread, like Nutella. The Quran says, accumulating knowledge is a worthy act. So Islamic mega-nerds created the first universities and libraries, comparing all the world's knowledge.
Anyway, with or without the main quest, everything that's currently happening across the sector can be accessed over the Intel tab. Here you'll find information about active jump gates, the current states of different systems, and more specialized events like colony crisis or bounties. Also, the information we have available here updates in real time to the sector's communication network and comm relays, so if you're too far outside the core worlds, you might only find out that a bounty was already claimed by someone else once you're back within comm range. But to avoid losing missions, we can formally accept them, though failing one later will cost us a small amount of reputation. Now, bounties on the other side can't be accepted and may simply vanish at random. Speaking of bounties, after securing yet another eagle for half the price at our last refueling stop, our fleet looks strong enough to actually start collecting a few. The nearest target isn't far, but we still need to be cautious, there could be anything hiding in this system. Luckily for us, our target is operating alone, so we don't have to worry about getting dragged into anything else. It seems he also wants to fight. Hello, sir, do you have the time? Certainly not. Okay, sweetheart, let's see. Well, Nexerelin doesn't change much about the battles themselves, but I'll quickly go over the basics for everyone new. The number of ships we can deploy at once is limited by our deployment points, and if we want to give our ship specific orders, we'll have to use our command points for that. Sadly, we don't get many of these little rascals, but at least they do refill over time. In fact, think of it as making a radio call. If we send several orders at once, the whole maneuver only costs a single command point, and we get a short window in which we can give additional orders for free. That makes good planning or spamming commands like a madman quite important. Much like in football, we have different types of ammunitions and various different shots, each more effective against certain targets than others, but early on, that's not something we need to worry about too much. And just like that, we take out the first strike for free. That ship can be quite annoying. Oh, here comes the rest of the gang. Guess it's time to throw our own junk into the fight. Not a second too soon. They almost got Gerald there, holy jeez. Leave him alone. These battles can get really chaotic, so let's group all our small ships around the cruiser. At least that gives us a bit of breathing room. Next we need to separate the Eagle from the rest of the fleet. There's no point in chasing the smaller ships around with our slow-moving bricks anyway. The bounty wasn't exaggerated either. The damn thing outspeeds us even backwards. To hell.
Yeah, this shake boat's nowhere to pass. To the sector, we stand past the party there, let them know where day we go. It's all like this shake, you fucking fools, they do it.
Copy that. Nice one, Gerald. We're getting pretty surrounded here. Maybe the cargo ship can pull a few of them away. That's a perfect setup for this useless ship. Those little ships are incredibly annoying. Once we get our phase ships, dealing with them should be a lot easier. Well, at least the cargo ship managed to pull a few of them away, but now I need to make sure we don't lose it after that. If you ever have to fight a stronger opponent, it's important to keep in mind that after all, movement relies on movement. So, with the right formation, almost any enemy becomes manageable. This battle was kind of simple. We just needed to hit the bullseye and all their dominoes collapsed onto each other like a house of cards. After the battle, we can recover any ships that were damaged but not completely destroyed, and personally, anything larger than a frigate is a keeper for me. But if you don't want to leave anything to chance here, I'd recommend installing reinforced bulkheads on your ships or picking up the restoration skill, which prevents you from permanently losing upgraded ships. Well, at least most of the time. As much as I enjoy the commission reward, I still have other plans in mind, and being under commission does in fact pose the risk of getting dragged into a random war at any time. So here we go, or here we leave. This improves our standing with several factions and also removes all negative political effects that came with the employment. But just as I was about to celebrate our newly won independence at Sindrian's bar, we encountered a rather paranoid officer. This chain of events begins a Sindrian Diktat side quest, which I absolutely cannot pronounce. And in Nexerelin, it plays out pretty much the same. Of course, you can also start with the ship or do the quest normally, but if you decide to fight your way through the quest instead, just keep in mind that any faction whose ships you destroy won't trade with you for a while after that. Now, if we mark the quest as already completed right from the start, we still get the ship, but we also lose the experience and the rest of the rewards. Anyway, since most missions only give XP or credits, there's little reason to complete them beforehand. Only a few quests actually grant specific items or sometimes ships, like in our case. But if you want to play the quest yourself, skipping it isn't really helpful. Luckily for you, I've even put together a ghastly little Pazifist guide for this quest, showing exactly what you need and how to complete it. You'll find it linked in the info card and below this video. However, I'm sure most of you have already done this quest countless times, so let me quickly summon it up for everyone who hasn't. And after this shocking twist, we are just going to jump straight to the end here. The quest is complete and we walk away with a free Executor class capital ship. Man, I love this quest. Now, if you already start with a ship like this, I wouldn't recommend picking up a second one right away. Mainly because of the costs, and we don't really need to fight anything that dangerous yet. Of course, you can still do it if you want, but mopping up pirates with 2 capital ships is a bit excessive, you know? Anyway, this ship isn't quite as tough as some other capital class vessels, but in my opinion it's very versatile and can be adapted to a lot of different roles. From here on, my next goal is a 9th battle group, which I've modded in. So I'm refitting this ship away from a missile-heavy setup and more towards support fighters instead. With all the new threats in the game, missile spam builds tend to be strong early on, but they usually fall off fairly quickly. I really love this ship. Well, she might look slightly different now, but she's still gonna be named Lisa. My little bird, my little flower, my sweet little nut. I know it's not much of a fleet yet, but with this ship and a cup of coffee, I'm more than ready to scour the entire sector for opportunities. And to get things going, we started with a dead drop. Exploration missions are cheap to run since they only cost fuel, even if the payouts aren't amazing. On the way back, we came across a small ship graveyard and actually managed to salvage a casual wolf, a half-charred hammerhead and a drum tanker that's clearly seen better days. Back in civilization, or rather in some barns of Fringe, we stumbled across a shady dealer trading heavy armaments for scrap metal. Sounds like a great deal, but I'm taking that as a personal insult from the game. I'm done pussyfooting around. Anyway, since we don't earn any interest, we might as well spend our cash in new goods, even though it always hurts a little to spend that much money. And taking a closer look at the black market, I actually found a few phase ships we've been waiting for. We followed that up with a classic Ox for a bit more speed and a small carrier to round things out. We've been traveling the sector for quite a while now, and you can really start to notice it in the markets. You know, I'm a simple man. When it comes to trading, I like to move it, but it's getting harder and harder to find good prices, which means we'll slowly have to start acquiring goods in other ways. Since the pirates have pretty weak defenses and already hate us anyway, we can start raiding them right away. Nexerelin also allows us to invade the planet outright, but we'll get to that later. There's so much to explain in this game, but I'll try to keep it short. If our ground strength is higher than their defenses, we can just launch an attack. Well, luckily for us, this planet isn't heavily fortified and has low stability, so bombardings are almost unnecessary. We could also perform slightly better here if we had dedicated troop ships. And if we now choose to deploy our troops, we can either raid for goods or damage the infrastructure. Now, when it comes to raiding, the only thing you really need to know is that difficulty and base value combined with the number of marines we send in determine our losses and our loot. Going for high-risk targets usually costs too many troops, so if you're just raiding for random goods, sticking to medium and low risk is often the better choice. The type of item you're looting doesn't really matter. The total value is determined by its base price and quantity, which makes it a good indicator for picking the best target. Damaging the infrastructure, on the other hand, can disrupt trade or even shut down military operations entirely. The same risk of troop loss applies here, and the number of marines we send in determines how long those facilities stay disabled. Right now though, I am mainly after domestic goods, but with our stack of marines we could also hit more than just one target. Sadly, the value of our loot does drop with each raid, so we have to move on and raid another world. This is definitely worth it. Even if we factor in troop losses here, we still made like close to 30k profit. That's really not too bad for simply horsing around. And while checking out the next pirate base, we stumbled across a ridiculously cheap eradicator. Well, it's only that cheap because you need a bunch of marines to pull it off, but that's exactly what our small private army is for. That said, we still got other business here, and this settlement is actually better defended than our marines can handle, which means it's time for our first tactical bombardment of the day. For each point of defense we need to use 1 unit of fuel, which makes total sense and reduces their resistance by a lot. And since the defenders are busy elsewhere, we can calmly loot the planet. The bombardment was costly, but we still walk away with around 25k in profits and a completely full cargo hold. Now, with the market in shambles, we can honestly sell the stuff just about anywhere. After selling our loot, I ran into a rather wealthy yet quite unfriendly VIP at the local bar, who wants to travel with us as a passenger. Well, what she doesn't know is that we also just picked up a bombardment contract and are about to fly straight into an active war zone with her. I was already wondering why there are so many patrols around here. Oh, wait. I think we may have just spotted the reason for all of this. Jeez, that's one hell of a carrier. God, what the hell? Well, fighting all of this could take quite a while, but luckily we don't have to. I hope. Ah yes, looks like we just need to make this little guy run. Gotcha! Now we only have to deal with the station on top, which changes the rules of the fight slightly. Well, the main difference when fighting stations is that there are no capture points or bonuses to contest, so we are able to deploy everything we have right from the start. But controlling the whole fleet at once is also something else. Anyway, right now the most important thing is to make sure none of our ships charges in alone. Hey, you hit me! Get back here! And of course, no phase ship should be sitting on the front line at the start of... Oh no, please, I didn't see that! Ah, jeez, the phase ship is trying to hide, but it's getting focused way too hard. Oh god, look at this. Its head went down like crazy. Maybe it's not too late to pull it out. Well, that works too, I guess. Man, that distracted me nicely. And now we're next. Oh, Reaper! Oh god, just caught that one with my last bit of shield. And we got even more incoming. Come on, shields, I need you right now. Ah, jeez, that's brutal. Oh god, what an opening. Now, if we still want to win this, the rest of our fleet has to move into position, or this could go south fast.
Yeah, I think it's close. Yeah, what went over there with this? There's the sun went down in the evening and get going. You know, I got the tunnel, 57 and, over.
Gerald, you should better watch your flux level. That nearly took me out too. But if you want to go back in, I'm fine with that. I already did my part, now it's your turn. That should give us a moment to recover safely at least. This truly is one massive junk fleet, but is it enough? We aren't fighting alone after all, but some of our ships are running dangerously low. Yeah, there goes the first part of this fracking station. What do my swollen eyes spot there? You're a little late, my friends. Oh, but just in time to take out my garbage backline, it seems. Nice. Yeah, finally! The station is breaking apart, and that turns the rest of the battle into little more than glorified target practice. Look at our flagship. We got nothing left, but neither does the station. What an absolutely weird fight. Oh well, at least we can repair all of our ships afterwards, so whatever. And as reward, we get scrap. Loads of it. Fair. But we ain't done yet. In fact, technically, we didn't even start. Anyway, after this fight, the path should be hopefully clear. Oh, no, not quite yet. There's still another mini-fleet for us to take care of, though this fight is hardly worth talking about. This is alright, now we can finally complete the bombardment contract. And while we are already here, just let me grab a little compensation for our trouble. By the way, you can also avoid negative political effects by spending story points, but honestly, it only makes sense if you care about the faction. Looks like the patrol managed to take care of the giant carrier in the meantime. I don't actually see it anywhere, but whatever. At least that gives us a bit more time to fill our cargo holds. That's quite a nice bonus on top, I'm very happy with that. But I have to admit, amidst all the fighting and looting, I almost completely forgot we had a passenger aboard. That must have been the trip of a lifetime. On the other side, that's what you get for booking Spirit Airlines. However, even if the Nexerelian markets are broken, it honestly feels pretty good to finally dump all the stuff out of our cargo hold. All things considered, we made almost as much money playing Bomber Taxi as we did trading. But unfortunately, just like in real life, it's never enough. God only knows how much money we're gonna need. And to answer that and many other questions, I completed the Luddic church quest, earning a bit of experience and far more dry data than anyone could possibly imagine. Anyway, the quest itself is fairly simple, though it does have a few pitfalls. But if you want to know how to handle it properly or what the exact costs and timings are, I have linked a quick little guide for you where I go into greater details and play around with some numbers. You'll find it at the top of your screen or below this video. Now, a figure that's also close to my heart is the number of people who subscribed. It's totally free and you can always unsubscribe later if you want. But if you already have subscribed, well, huge thanks to all of you. It really helps me out massively in my ongoing quest to educate the entirety of YouTube about Starsector related topics. After all, I am still hoping this video reaches anyone. There are so many freaking copyright violations in here, it's actually insane. But that just seems to be how YouTube works these days.
Then there was a vole, which looks like a mole, a combination of a mole and a mouse.
Anyway, not everything here is stolen. In fact, my new avatar was hand-drawn by my good friend Hikaru Haruka, and I'm incredibly proud of both her work and how I turned out. I also went ahead and made some actual merch together with Jesse Inko, including these adorable looking stickers, and some of them are even available here on YouTube. They are absolutely perfect for spicing up your comments or annoying people in the chat whenever we actually find the time to stream on the weekend. Also, maybe I'll make a plushie someday as well. I've already got a few ideas, but these aren't exactly the easiest times to spend money on merch. And if you're watching this in the future, you probably already know how everything turned out. That possible future, along with the links to the artist videos and merch, is located right below this video. Also, while you're down there, let me know what you think. I always enjoy reading what's going on with all of you guys. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's get back to the guide. But before we continue our journey, a quick word on the skill tree, since I didn't really cover it before. I know it's kind of basic stuff, so feel free to skip ahead if you simply don't want to hear it or don't value my opinion. Well, for the rest of you, it really looks worse than it is. You see, the skill tree is divided into combat, leadership, technology and industry. But of course, you simply won't have enough points to unlock everything, so you'll need to specialize and decide what matters most to you at the moment. In my opinion, early on, quality of life skills like faster repairs, better sensors, reduced fuel consumption and increased cargo capacity are almost always a solid pick. But if you prefer combat instead, the red and green line boost your flagship and overall fleet strength, while the blue line is where face ships and AI-controlled vessels come into play. Well, I guess also worth mentioning is that operating AI ships requires a final blue capstone skill, but the unique Onslaught Mark I does not require the skill at all. However, the yellow line focuses more on logistics and infrastructure. I would say the demon removal skill in particular is the strongest here, because it gradually restores the entire fleet for free over time. Anyway, if we want to change our setup at any point, we can simply respec all our skills by spending a story point, although there are usually better ways to use them. But don't stress too much about all of that, just pick whatever fits your current plan. After all, the only one who has to be stressed here is me, cause this video keeps getting longer and wider. So, to cut some time here, if you want a deep dive on this topic, my good friend Morrexppy has put out a decent guide, showing every single skill in greater detail and discussing everything you need to know about it. The link to his guide can also be found right down below. In the meantime, we've been very busy and went for a quick trade into a Nexerelin and a domain full of magic, wonders and pollution. Prices here aren't exactly cheap, but in return you can almost always find what you're looking for. From rare weapons to unique ships, sometimes even ones from modded factions. But there's far more than just a couple of old ships to discover here. I'll show you. Once we arrived at the bar, it didn't take long before my tripod started making strange noises. Ah, a message it seems. Well, this kind of event kicks off the Remnant Quest line, and the first one is actually fairly simple. We are tasked with convincing an independent planet in the Arcadian system to hand over a few beta cores they are currently studying, or torturing according to our quest giver. Oh well, sure thing, sweetheart, you got the right cat for the job.
Don't do anything I wouldn't do.
Spending a couple of credits here gets us done quickly and serves as our entry point into the Remnant Quest line. Though, just be aware that if you fight your way through the quest instead and somehow damage one of the cores, you will fail the entire quest line immediately. I know it doesn't look like much, but you see, by completing a few of these quests along the way, we can improve our standing with remnants, and that makes exploration much less stressful, which alone makes this quest worth engaging with. On our way to refuel, we ran into a lone convoy, and since we conveniently have a fleet ID turned off right now, they don't seem too sure who's attacking them. To be honest, other than the Atlas freighter, I'm not really interested in the rest of the fleet. But unfortunately, it managed to get away. Oh, come on. I was kind of hoping the auto reserve would prevent exactly that. And there really wasn't much else of worth here. Well, except from an absurd amount of food. Guess we'll have to go back for round 2. You are going nowhere, my friend. Alright, let's see. It's completely wrecked. Just hand it over. Well, that turned out to be a pretty expensive Atlas if you factor in the double surprise attack reputation hit and the story point to recover it. At least we won't go hungry anytime soon, I guess. Anyway, with our new freighters in tow, we went for a quick stop at the next station to reorganize a bit and came across a delivery contract that fits our expanded cargo capacity almost perfectly. Look at this reward! It would honestly be a waste not to take it. And not even 5 seconds later, I stumbled across yet another Atlas, just casually drifting through space. Seriously, this almost never happens to me. What the hell? However, since we are already up here with the 9th battle group, I figured we might as well take a closer look at the local ship market. We are hauling way too many fighters and random junk right now, but unfortunately there wasn't much worth buying for us here. And just as I thought we'd have no luck finding any new ships, an Apex design collector fleet jumped into the system. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of scares me because I have absolutely no clue what I'm actually looking at. Looks like someone mashed together a bunch of carriers and freighters. Jeez, that's one hell of a fleet. With a fleet that size, surely something has to drop, right? Even the small modded ships are usually worth far more than the vanilla ones. But I guess we have to be a bit more patient. Oh, well, or maybe not. It's okay. Not bad, but we are already running out of space, so I'd rather wait for something a little bit better. Oh, yes, that's more like it. Who are you? A tech carrier, huh? You're coming with me. Yoink. That's a nice start, but I'm sure there's more. Ah, there we go. What's this? Ah, trash. Oh, this one is also kind of small. You know, I could actually use something like that. Why not? Well, let's see how far this invasion fleet gets. We are definitely sticking around. We should really be glad these factions like us, because we are basically just picking up the leftovers while they are doing all the hard work over there. Of course, a few more ships still need to explode first. Come on, folks! Ah, jeez, looks like the battle group absolutely clapped them. Oh dear, fresh loot! Oh, I mean, what a tragedy! Anyway, what do we have here? You are... a fuel tanker? What the shit? Huh. Well, turns out the actual tanker carries more fuel and is even a bit cheaper. I have absolutely no clue what this thing actually is, but I want it. I don't even care if it costs me a story point. Hand it over. Anyway, let's check the rest, shall we? Oh, that's neat. Exactly what I was hoping for. I think. These are a freighter variant and a carrier variant. And even a tiny little carrier. Sweet! But they still got a few ships. I think this is far from being over just yet. I might have spoken a little too soon. There goes the rest of their fleet. And what's this? Another one. No thanks. You know, some of these ship names sound incredibly fancy, but most of them definitely don't look like what I imagine at all. But there has to be more here. Ooh, battlecruiser. That sounds powerful. Explore! Oh boy, that's an absolute insane hull. What a beast! So, it also costs an arm and a leg to maintain every month. Good grief! Still, it'd be a shame to leave that behind, wouldn't it? And there's even more. Well, at this point we almost have one of every ship they had. This is absolutely ridiculous. I've never been this lucky looting a battlefield before. But to be fair, this also took quite a while. He basically spent an entire month lurking around and selling crap off screen. Oh, looks like that was finally the end of the fleet. So, unfortunately, most of the ships were actually destroyed. But for the early game, this battlefield has been an absolute goldmine. We have definitely more than made back our trip out here and can now finally cash in our delivery contract on top. And while we are here, well, some of these ships can only fit certain weapon types on their slots, so if you get the chance, it usually makes sense to pick up a few matching weapons, even if they are kind of expensive. To be honest, I still don't know much about these new ships, but when in doubt, fewer helmets and stronger shields are usually a pretty safe bet. I also went along and invested a story point into most of these combat ships, so once we unlock the restoration skill, they should hopefully always be recoverable. These freighters seem to be modular, which is actually really handy. Well, if we had the mods, we could go for maximal fuel capacity when heading out, and once we have burned through most of it, just swap over to cargo space instead. Nice! Now, even with plenty of freighters, you still need a safe place to store everything. Personally, I like to keep my marines in abandoned stations, since hauling them around all the time gets pretty expensive. Of course, you can also store pretty much anything else here, from weapons and crew to entire ships. In our case, that cuts down monthly expenses and our fleet supply consumption quite a bit. You see, at abandoned stations, you don't actually have to pay the wages of any crew or marines you leave behind. Sadly, that doesn't work with your own colonies or another faction's storage though. Only these abandoned stations let your people work for free. That said, we don't really need the marines right now, and we're barely carrying any cargo either, which means a few of our freighters can take a well-earned vacation in our new garage. And while you weren't looking, I sold off all that looted food for a completely totally fair price. Still, Nexerelin really doesn't make it easy to find good trades. From there, an innocent little espionage mission that I accidentally accepted thanks to my fat fingers led us straight into the middle of an unexpected war zone. Looks like the Nines just mobilized everything they had left. But there are barely any Sindrian ships around though. Jeez, this is an absolute mess. Everyone is here. What a party! Anyway, luckily we left the faction early enough, so we aren't part of this at all. Let's see what we've got. Nah, it's mostly just small stuff and a couple of guns here and there. But surely there's got to be... Oh, there it is! Well, I know that one. Even though we already have one, there's no way I'm passing this up. That beauty's worth 500,000 credits. There sure are a lot of scavengers flying around, but to be fair, they never actually caused me any trouble. Now, that fleet looks a lot more intimidating. Well, except for all the troop support ships. Sadly, the scavengers don't seem to be interested in joining the fight either. And honestly, the rest of those smaller ships aren't really worth recovering anyway. Oh wait, what? That's new to me. Looks like someone already claims this wreck. Okay. Well, there's probably enough scrap for every war. Oh wait, the rest too? Nah, whatever. I'm not about to start a war over a few wrecks. We've already made out like bandits. We've had some insane timing so far, always stumbling into the right places at exactly the right moment. But until we unlock the restoration skill, all of these ships are going straight back into storage. The Marines too. Otherwise, we'd have to grind an absurd amount of credits just to keep all of this running. However, to understand where the hell all these crazy invasion fleets came from, let's take a closer look at the new diplomacy tab. Starting from the top, we can see some basic informations about the selected factions. These so-called alignments represent their political and cultural orientations and determine which factions they are naturally friendly toward and which ones they tend to dislike. Values like corporate, technocracy or hierarchical reflect their ideology and influence how well they get along with similar aligned factions or how strong they clash with opposing principles. In addition to that, factions can have revengeance claims. These are territorial claims on markets they have lost or tend to retake, and they increase the likelihood of tensions or military actions of any kind. We can also see which goods a faction in particular needs to keep its market stable both during invasions and when managing larger empires. Below that are military behavior indicators, but let me explain. Well, invasion points determine how active a faction is, and more points means more invasions, colonization attempts and general aggression. War wariness on the other side builds up over long conflicts and pushes factions towards peace, especially if they have traits like weak-willed or something. Last but not least, infamy reflects how reckless or expansionist the faction has been, and much like in real life, high infamy makes diplomacy way harder, since other factions grow more suspicious over time. Anyway, we also get the main spreadsheet here, and this bad boy shows how selected factions view everyone else relation-wise. I know it looks kind of cursed, but it's actually fairly simple. You see, the overall value is made up of several factors. Under the slider base, we can see their law-based default relations to other factions. The slider called Relations shows dynamic changes from treaties, wars, events or agent actions. Alignments focuses on ideological compatibility between each other. Recent events display temporary modifiers that vanish over time. Common foes unveil bonding through shared enemies. Dominance gives you an insight into the rivalry between the major powers. Revengeism builds up if there's tensions over claimed markets. And Traits lets you see their inherited personality modifiers. Now, most of this runs in the background, but over time it creates a very dynamic political landscape that's a bit more complex and a lot wilder than normal. Moving on to the bottom, we can find permanent faction traits that shape their long-term behavior. Well, to explain every trait would take forever, but I'm gonna try to explain at least a couple. So let's take a closer look at Tritech for example. Well, first and for all, they have Monopolist, which means that they are more hostile towards economic rivals. Weak-willed implies they get tired faster in longer wars. Anarchists say they prefer free trade. Low profile makes them less attractive invasion targets, and Devious improves their agent efficiency. Anyway, there are far more than just these couples, but to sum this up, you could say that these traits define how a faction behaves strategically and why some powers consistently act more aggressive, sus, or defensive than others. However, since diplomacy mostly comes down to watching numbers rather than actually negotiating, Nexerelin gives us a few extra ways to influence relations, from agents who can smooth things or force uprisings over to invasions and rebellions if you want to take over the planet. These kind of takeovers are a bit more involved than your average raid, but luckily there's a special quest that teaches us the basics, assuming you don't accidentally click past it. This tutorial-like mission can be started by interacting with the appropriate commander inside of Im's helm, so no worries, it won't actually start by just visiting the planet, but if you want to try it, make sure to bring some actual marines and heavy armaments, otherwise you'll fail it immediately. And to save you from making the same mistake as I did on my first attempt, here's a quick rundown of how it works. You see, every invasion in Nexerelin is turn-based, and 1 turn equals 1 in-game day. Basically, each turn we can move our ground units, battles are resolved automatically, and the situation on the planet updates. This continues until either all defenders are defeated or one side clearly controls the majority of the planet. When it comes to ground forces, our troops are actually organized into companies like Alpha, Bravo, Gamma, and consist either of regular Marines, heavy mechs, or if you defend, also militia units. Now, as a ground unit, you might imagine there's only so much you can achieve during a planetary invasion on the front line. Well, that's why we also deploy combat mechs alongside them to spice up the battlefield and turn the front line into a blender for militia units. In our case, as the attacker, we'll mainly be deploying Marines and heavy armaments. Marines are your all-around combat troop and can handle pretty much every objective on their own, while heavy armaments greatly increase your combat strength and help to reduce casualties. The only trade-off is that they require additional manpower and supplies to deploy. Defenders on the other side use the same type of forces, but they also field local militia, who are cheap, poorly trained and have low morale. They are not meant to win battles on their own, but they can slowly advance and absorb casualties. If we take a closer look at the planetary map, we can see that each company has its own strength, morale and positioning. Morale is especially important as it effectively acts like a second health bar for our troops, and if morale ever drops too low, the unit will fight very poorly, retreat or collapse entirely. On the upside, morale can slowly recover if a company remains out of combat for several turns. Also, each location on this map shows a simple indicator of deployed troop strength, and to win, yeah, well, you just simply need more than the other side, which doesn't always mean having more troops. Now, to issue orders, we receive a pool of movement points every turn, and these are spent to move companies between industries such as spaceport, light industry or ground defenses. Well, I guess you could also let the AI handle movement, but giving orders manually usually leads to way better positioning and fewer losses. And while we are already here, I think we should also take a closer look at the cost structure of invasions. Deploying ground troops consume supplies at the moment they enter the battlefield, but luckily, once deployed, our forces don't consume any additional supplies at all. From that point on, their effectiveness depends entirely on the remaining manpower, morale and positioning. This means that long invasions are not inherently more expensive, losses are what really costs you. Anyway, every location on the planet acts as a separate control point. You're not fighting a single abstract defender pool, instead you're capturing and holding specific structures. Now, a very effective general strategy is target prioritization. Rather than attacking everything at once, it's usually best to capture one or, in our case, 2 civilian or industry structures first and then expand outwards from there. That said, military bases and defense complexes are often best taken last, cause by that stage their station troops are frequently sent as reinforcement to other locations, leaving those defenses thin and easier to overwhelm, but in our case, they are already locked into a fight and stay exactly where they are. Okay, this works for me. Besides commanding ground units, since we are traveling with an armada of ships, we also have more potent options to intervene in fights. Special abilities like fire support and electronic warfare should be used as early as possible in the area you actually plan to attack.
Oppenheimer, don't fail me now!
Sadly, their effectiveness depends on your fleet composition, which means capital ships and quality cruisers improve your fire support effects, while ships with high EMC rating make electronic warfare more impactful or, in our case, usable at all. However, fire support cannot be directly applied to defensive buildings unless you or an ally holds them, which makes cracking heavy fortified positions more difficult, but to be honest, with our massive force, all of this matters little. There's also the Inspire ability, but sadly it costs a story point, which is why I and many others ignore it completely. On the other side, it can be a lifesaver if your troops are being pushed back or suffer from low morale. Well, whether it's worth the cost is really situational, but nonetheless, it's an option worth remembering. Anyway, the invasion ends once the side runs out of effective ground units or loses control of its key industries, and if we win, the planet changes and becomes part of our faction. But if we lose a battle, all committed troops are gone and the defenders, or in this case, invaders, retain control. And after winning the fight, we met up with Ross at the local bar and got a reward, or rather something that barely counts as one. Well, normally the planet should belong to us now, but I suppose the real value in this quest came from the knowledge itself. That's just whatever. Now that we have got this tutorial behind us, it's time to focus on the rest of the sector. But before we head back out, let's take a quick look at our fleet. Well, if we ignore differences in weapons and the whole high-tech, low-tech divine for a hot second, there are basically 4 ways to design our fleet with hull mods. Combat-focused, cargo and efficiency optimized, mobility and stealth-oriented, or a bloody mix of everything. As for the early and late game, it's usually best to go all in combat strengths, but for our mid-game situation, we are probably better off with a mixture of mobility, exploration gear and a few larger combat-focused ones. Now, for what we are planning, we'll need some punchy ships that aren't too expensive and make exploring the galaxy a bit easier. For that, I've added some scavenger ships to the fleet and installed some surveillance equipment on a few others. That makes salvaging more profitable and exploration much cheaper. As for weapons, we can either stick to the standard stuff or go for the freshly modded specials. In fact, I think I've added enough weapons to launch any refit addict straight into a stat range trip of confusing madness. But to keep it simple, these modded weapons mostly don't differ much from the vanilla ones, and across all 3 weapon types, their effectiveness against shields and armor is about the same as usual. What really sets them apart is their range and how they handle in combat. Now, when it comes to shipbuilding, constant variation is the name of the game. Well, I mean the name of the game is Starsector, but this is how I play Starsector. However, going into greater detail would go beyond the scope of this video, and if you're only playing with the Nexerelin mod installed, these modded ships and weapons won't really matter for you anyway. So, if you want to deep dive into shipbuilding or discover some truly funky setups, make sure to check out my refit and loadout guide, linked in the info card and below this video. Maybe I will also make a video just about weapons and the best build for each ship one day, but we'll see. Generally speaking, the newly added ships and weapons can get pretty expensive, but in my experience they are well worth it. Though I'm really not that familiar with the newly added ships, but I'll surely be able to tell you more about them once this project is near its end. Anyway, if we set trading and bounties aside, exploration is basically our only way out of the early game, and by now we have gathered enough ships and credits to support an extended expedition. So, when we leave the core worlds, we should at least bring enough fuel, supplies, and as we plan to survey planets, it doesn't hurt to bring a good stack of heavy machinery as well. Inside the core world, we had relatively safe times, lots of people flying around, and we were just a small target among many. Outside the core world though, we are usually the only target, and there are plenty of people just waiting for explorers like us. But I'm afraid that's where we have to continue next time, when I finally finished editing all the rest of this bloody project. Well, first I have to say, sorry the damn video took so long, and thank you all for waiting so patiently. There's been a lot going on lately, and if you've been following the news, you probably know what I mean. Anyway, the second part is already on its way, and should be finished much sooner this time. Also, you better believe me, the second part is gonna be insane. We will dive straight into the remaining endgame content and take a closer look at things like agents and see how colonies work together to form a powerful star system, along with plenty of mechanics we haven't covered and a few other things I don't want to spoil just yet.
Ah, here we go! Ooh, it's dizzying!
However, thanks for sticking around with me till the end here. I hope this video was somewhat helpful. Well, you know, it's always a little bit cursed to cut a video of this size, so if I missed something, let me know down in the comments. Also, huge thanks to all of my subscribers, members and Kronos for supporting the channel and making new guides possible. Now, if you want to see a name in the credits or support upcoming guides, check out my Patreon, there is even a free tier available. And as always, I wish each and every one of you a lovely day, and goodbye for now.